She promised me everything, until I found her in a chat group, planning a better life without me. I handed her the second set of keys like it was a ring. She cupped them in both hands and laughed against my mouth. That little laugh, I told myself, meant we were finally on the same page. The apartment still smelled like new paint and ground coffee. We'd burned the first pot on the first night because the hot plate ran too hot, so the scent lived in the curtains as a reminder that beginnings were messy. On the living room wall, under the single lamp I kept forgetting to turn off, we pinned a map of Europe and stuck red pushpins into places we said we'd go once money wasn't a fire we were always putting out. Lisbon got 2 pins because she said she wanted to see the river from 2 different hills. I joked that 1 pin was for sunrise and 1 for sunset. For the life we deserve, she whispered. And I believed her because I wanted to. I work nights as a dispatcher. Too many trucks, not enough roads that stay dry, not enough drivers who sleep. It ages your voice first. You start sounding like a guy who knows what every hour feels like. She said she liked that about me. The way I could count without looking. She liked my spreadsheets and the way I folded receipts into a single envelope in the drawer by the stove. We're a team, she'd say, tapping the envelope with her finger. You do the numbers, I do the plans. The plans were a whole mood board. Printouts from travel blogs, a list of milestones written in her looping script, new laptop for her freelance design, language classes, a weekend retreat that promised to unlock independence. She'd show me photos of terracotta roofs and pastel houses like she could make a door appear if I loved her hard enough. When she asked for my banking app password, just while we're syncing budgets, I gave it to her with a pride that sat like a warm stone in my chest. I'd spent so long being the guy who kept his head down that it felt like a promotion to trust someone. I saved her face in my phone as Marta, everything, because I have a cheesy side that nobody at work sees. Nights bled into mornings. The blinds in our bedroom made barcode shadows across our sheets. I'd get home with the sun snapping at my eyelids, and she'd be at the table in a hoodie, hair up, eyes bright. In that way, caffeine makes people look brave. She was doing sessions with a mentor, she said. Nothing formal, just a guy with a community and a program for women who don't want to be rescued. The phrase landed harmlessly because I never thought of myself as a rescuer. I thought of myself as a guy who could fix a broken towel rack with a butter knife. It's about boundaries, she told me, running a fingertip along the rim of her mug. Like, choosing what's mine. I told her that sounded good. It did. It sounded like more of the competence I fell for. On my 3rd week of nights after we moved in, we bought a kettle that didn't burn the coffee. I punched in our building's code while balancing grocery bags on my forearms, and she leaned in to watch because she forgets numbers on purpose and mouths the pattern like a song instead. I kissed her forehead when the lock thunked open. Inside, the living room lamp was still on and the map shone like a promise behind her. She kissed my cheek and took the heavier bag. You're learning to let go, she teased. Look at you not insisting on carrying everything. It's funny what you notice when you're exhausted. The apartment had a few drifts of her things that moved like tide lines. Scarves over the chair back, a notebook that followed the sunlight across the floor, a ceramic bowl that collected earrings. The bowl filled faster lately. She started a group chat with her friends from the program, and her phone would buzz and then buzz again. A pattern that didn't sound like family or clients. I tried not to clock it, but dispatchers become human clocks. They're amazing, she'd say, thumb traveling fast over the screen. It's like someone finally handed me a vocabulary. When you love somebody, you become a translator for all the strange things they bring home. I decided vocabulary meant she'd found a rhythm that made her feel taller. I decided a weekend retreat could be worth a few extra shifts. She sent me a playlist called Lisbon Energy that made even our hallway smell like salt. At night, coming off a 12-hour shift with a stack of route changes in my brain, I'd stand in the dark kitchen listening to the kettle's first boil and picture us at a table by the water. Sometimes, I'd feel her arms wrap around my waist from behind. Sometimes, she'd be on her phone at the other end of the couch, smiling at nothing I could see. The first crack in the plaster wasn't even a fight. It was a script. We were going over our milestones with markers when she started talking in tidy bullet points about financial autonomy and shared responsibilities. The words were fine, they were even good, but the melody was too perfect. Like a demo track. I asked if she was okay and she laughed and tapped my nose with the marker. I'm more than okay. Don't worry so much. That's what people say to guys like me who've made worrying a profession. I slept badly the next day. Between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, the city drills into itself and our windows hum. I woke to a voice memo playing from her phone, just the end of it, as she paused it. Freedom asks for a cost. It could have been about cutting sugar. It could have been about anything. I pretended I hadn't heard. I've learned that pretending buys you time you can spend on something useful later. That evening, I made pasta, and she poured wine and we tried on the kind of normal that fits even when it's snug. She told me about her client who wanted a logo that was confident but soft. And I made a joke about bread that had the same resume. She laughed with her head back, and my body believed we were safer than we were. When she got up to shower, she left her laptop open on the table. One tab a translation site, one tab a spreadsheet of savings goals, one tab a chat window with 2 words showing in bold at the top. I didn't read them. I'm not a snooper. I stacked plates and told myself the kettle needed descaling again. I tried to be the kind of man who trusts the things he says he trusts. She came out in a towel, cheeks pink, and asked if I could make her tea. I went to the kitchen, rinsed the mug she likes with the chip on the ear, set the kettle on. The night through the window had that city orange to it, and our fridge motor took a breath and then another. When I came back with the mug, the laptop screen had gone to sleep. A soft gray slab. I set the tea down and the little tremor of the table woke the trackpad. The screen flared. For a second, literally a second, the chat window blinked into focus before it asked for her Face ID. A notification banner from the same chat wobbled at the top, blue and white, casual as a weather alert. The group name sat there like a slap, written neatly in someone else's hand. Better life without me. Her Face ID unlocked the laptop as she leaned over to grab the tea, and the banner slid away like a guilty thought. She didn't see my eyes catch on the phrase, didn't see my hand pause. She kissed my jaw and said, "You're the best." And I nodded because my body didn't know what else to do. Outside, a siren wound itself out and down. The kettle clicked as it cooled. I told myself that chat names are jokes, private sarcasm, internet humor. I told myself she'd tell me if it was anything else. I told myself people name their group chats "We Hate Mondays" and still show up on time. I lay in bed later with my brain doing a slow inventory of every conversation we'd ever had about the future. Every promise folded carefully and put away. The map on the living room wall was visible from the hallway. Lisbon's pins threw 2 red shadows, like eyes. I could hear her thumb skimming her phone in the dark. That small, quick sound, and then I could hear nothing. "It's probably nothing," I said into the pillow. "It's probably a joke." The word probably tried to settle somewhere I could live with it. Around 3, she rolled toward me and tucked her toes under my calf. "You're thinking again," she said, half asleep. I kissed the top of her head and lied that I wasn't. She slept. I counted the seconds between the refrigerator turning on and off and told myself that tomorrow would make more sense than today. The morning after I saw that banner, I convinced myself I'd dreamed it. Sleep deprivation can stitch hallucinations into your eyelids if you let it. But then I watched her at the table, sipping her coffee like the liquid was braver than either of us, and every vibration of her phone turned my chest into a drum. She looked up once, caught me staring, and smiled with that same, "we're a team" smile I used to believe without edits. "What?" she asked. I told her nothing. But the nothing tasted sour. Work was relentless that week. Routes got shifted because of storms in the Midwest, and I was stuck on the phone at 2 a.m., telling a guy in Texas that, no, the warehouse couldn't open early. I kept hearing phantom buzzes in my headset, like her chat was bleeding through the wires. During break, my coworker Ilya nudged me and said I looked like I'd forgotten what gravity was. He's blunt like that. I laughed it off, but when he offered me half of his sandwich, I almost said, "Do you ever feel like someone is rehearsing your absence?" Instead, I just said thanks. Back home, Marta had candles burning. She was dressed in a sweater 2 sizes too big, sleeves swallowing her wrists. She kissed me quick and said, "You're a ghost lately." I almost laughed at the irony. We ate takeout on the couch, and I let her curl against me because my body still remembered how to believe in her warmth. At one point, she reached for her laptop and opened it, angled slightly away from me. Maybe it was habit, maybe paranoia. But in the screen's reflection on the window, I saw lines of text moving, a list numbered 1 to 5. I couldn't read the words, just the shape of them, neat and mechanical. She closed it fast when I shifted, as if it had burned her hands. I told myself again not to snoop. My father once said that love is a house without locked doors, and I'd carried that like scripture. But what if someone else is secretly bricking up the exits? That thought crawled under my skin and wouldn't leave. A few nights later, I woke early, 3 hours into my day sleep, eyes sandpaper dry. The apartment was quiet except for Marta's voice. Not words, just tones, lilts of conversation. I padded out, bare feet cold on the parquet. She was in the kitchen, phone to her ear, voice pitched low. I caught only fragments. "Next step, no backlash. He won't see it coming." I froze like a thief in my own hallway. She laughed, soft and short, then said, "Yes, Lisbon is still the dream." My stomach flipped. Lisbon, our double pin. I made a noise on purpose, scuffing my foot, and walked in with a fake yawn. She jumped like I'd caught her stealing, then pressed her phone to her chest and ended the call. "Work client," she said, eyes too wide. "Logo revision. Sorry if I woke you." I kissed her temple and let it slide. But the excuse felt like wet paper. No client needs to plan, no backlash. The next day, My aunt stopped by with a basket of apples from her yard. She has a way of reading me I've never liked. She eyed the cluttered coffee table, the travel brochures, the map with its confident pins. "You two really think ahead," she said, voice neutral. I shrugged. "Planning is half the fun." Marta chimed in from the kitchen. My aunt nodded slowly, then caught my gaze over Marta's shoulder. "Just remember," she said, "plans without roots blow away in the first storm." She left an apple in my hand like a warning disguised as a gift. That night, while Marta showered, I lingered in the living room. Her laptop was open again, charging. The screen was black but alive, humming with potential. I hovered, telling myself I wasn't the kind of man who pried. But then a notification blinked across the lock screen, quick as a lightning strike. A preview of a message, only a sentence before it disappeared. Sharing the protocol. Step by step. No loose ends. My throat closed around the words. The chat name sat above it, mocking me with the same cruel title, Better Life Without Me. When the bathroom door opened, I backed away and sat on the couch like I'd never moved. She patted out in steam and towel, smiling at me like nothing had changed. Maybe nothing had, for her. For me, everything had. That night, I didn't count the refrigerator cycles. I counted the spaces between her breaths and wondered how long she'd been planning a life that erased me. I started carrying a notebook with me, the kind dispatchers use to track route numbers when the system glitches. It felt safer than screenshots or stolen glances. Every time I caught a phrase, a glimpse of her screen, a sudden change in tone, I wrote it down. Not the words themselves. At first, just impressions. Cold smile. Bullet points again. Lisbon mentioned. It made me feel like I wasn't losing my mind. If patterns emerged, I'd see them on paper. If not, maybe I'd just prove myself paranoid. But the patterns did emerge. Too clean. Too sharp. One afternoon, when I walked in early from a shorter shift, I found her and her friend Darina in our kitchen. They fell silent mid-sentence, that heavy pause like dust hanging in sunlight. I caught a single phrase before it died. Document everything. They looked at me with twin smiles, too rehearsed to be real. Darina excused herself 5 minutes later, leaving her mug half full. The word document echoed in my brain long after the door shut. Document what? Who? That evening, when Marta slipped out to meet a client, I did something I swore I never would. I opened her laptop. My hands shook so badly I had to type her password twice. And there it was. Not a joke, not a meme, not a random group of friends. A private Telegram chat with 5 members. The banner at the top, Better Life Without Me. I read until my eyes blurred. The messages were structured like minutes of a meeting. Dates, action items, assigned tasks. Create a narrative of control. Collect examples. Exaggerate if necessary. All financial assets should be restructured under his responsibility. Easier for future split. Record emotional reactions, especially raised voice. Gather corroborating witnesses, friends, neighbors. Prepare exit as liberation story. Victim, survivor. My heart hammered so loud I thought it would wake the neighbors. My name wasn't written, but every he was a mirror shoved into my face. I slammed the laptop shut, terrified she'd walk in and catch me, but also terrified that she wouldn't. That she'd keep on weaving this plan in rooms where I wasn't invited. I sat in the dark with my fists against my forehead until the headlights of a passing car painted the ceiling and vanished. From that night on, I became an actor in my own house. I laughed when she laughed. I kissed her cheek when she leaned in. I nodded at her talk of boundaries and growth. Inside, I memorized everything. I began saving receipts separately, setting up automatic statements sent to my private email, logging every transfer I made. I bought a cheap voice recorder and tucked it in my jacket pocket during tense conversations. Not because I wanted ammunition, but because I needed to know my own truth would survive their rewrite. I confided in Ilya one night at work. He was heating soup in the break room microwave, and I blurted it out. "I think my girlfriend's planning some kind of staged breakup with witnesses." He didn't laugh. He stirred his soup and said, "Then you need to be the boring one. Boring saves you. Calm, careful, unshakable. Paper trails beat stories." His words were a lifeline. The worst part was reading Marta's messages. She wasn't the ringleader. That was Darina. And some man named Maxim, a coach I'd never met. Marta's texts were hesitant, full of question marks. "Are you sure this is right? What if he doesn't react that way? He's not a bad guy, though." And then, every time, Darina's crisp answers shut her down. "That's what they all say. Trust the process." "You want freedom, don't you?" And Marta would cave. "You're right. Okay." I wanted to scream at the screen. I wanted to shake her and ask if freedom was really worth destroying me. But instead, I sat there, alone, listening to the refrigerator hum. The day I finally heard Maxim's voice made everything snap into place. Marta had left her phone on the counter, a voice note still playing through the tiny speaker. His tone was smooth, rehearsed, every syllable dipped in certainty. Freedom demands sacrifice. If you feel guilt, it means the process is working. The guilt is the tether to the old life. Cut it, and you'll soar. I felt my stomach turn. He wasn't talking to her, he was talking at her, carving scripts into her brain. And she was listening. I picked up my notebook that night and wrote a single line in block letters. Do not lose yourself in their story. It became my mantra. I would collect, prepare, wait. I wouldn't give them the explosion they wanted. I'd be the calmest man in the room until the truth had enough weight to tip the scale. Still, when I lay down beside her and she pressed her hand to my chest, whispering team into the dark, my throat ached so badly I thought I'd choke. The plan came to life on a Saturday night. Like theater that had been in rehearsals for months, I'd seen it coming. Darina's hints, Maxim's instructions, Marta's nervous glances, but it still rattled me to watch it unfold in my own kitchen. It started small. Marta asked if I could help with the bills, her voice rising and falling like a practiced melody. She pulled out receipts I'd never seen before, subscriptions, gadgets I never approved. You agreed, she insisted, but her eyes flicked toward her phone as if checking cues. My pulse stayed level. I laid the receipts down in a neat row and said evenly, these aren't mine. Her lips trembled, and for a split second I saw the crack in her mask. Then the knock at the door. Darina, flanked by two of Marta's program friends, smiling too wide. They came in like they belonged, sat down like they were witnesses waiting for testimony. The air thickened with unspoken instructions. Marta's hand shook as she poured tea. I knew from the chat logs what they wanted. Escalation. A raised voice. Slammed fists. Something to capture on their phones. Proof for whatever story they'd been weaving. I gave them nothing. I kept my voice so calm it sounded foreign to me. I offered them sugar. I asked about their work. Ilya's words played in my head. Boring. Saves you. But their script was relentless. Darina baited me about controlling finances. One friend chimed in about how hard it must be to live with someone so rigid. Marta finally broke into tears. Too quick. Too precise. It should have torn me apart, but instead, I watched it like an audience member, seeing the stage lights, the cues, the lines delivered in sequence. And then something unscripted happened. Marta's phone lit up with a message in the chat. Execute the plan tonight. Call if he resists. She froze. And for the first time, guilt flashed raw across her face. She put the phone down too fast, but I'd already read it. The kitchen felt like it was tilting. I pushed my chair back slowly, deliberately, and went to the drawer. My hand closed around the folder I'd prepared for weeks. When I set it on the table, their chatter died. Inside were printed copies of the chat logs, highlighted lines about provoking me, transferring debts, making him look dangerous, bank statements showing which purchases were hers, not mine, a voice recorder I pressed play on, Maxim's smooth sermon about guilt and freedom filling the kitchen air. Their faces drained of color. Darina blustered, "You stole her private messages, that's illegal." But her voice cracked under the weight of the evidence. One of the friends shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting toward the door. "Marta," she broke. Tears spilled real this time, not rehearsed. "I didn't want this," she whispered, voice splintering. "I thought it was just a way to leave clean, to start over without hurting him." Her gaze finally met mine, full of panic and shame. "I never wanted you ruined." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But Maxim's voice was still spilling out of the recorder, calm and commanding. "Do not falter. Doubt is weakness. Push through." And then, as if summoned, her phone rang. The name on the screen, Maxim. She put it on speaker with shaking hands, maybe hoping for guidance. His voice filled the room, unaware of the audience. "Stop crying, Marta. Either you finish it tonight, or you lose everything we built." The silence that followed was suffocating. Everyone had heard it. Everyone had seen the proof. The stage lights went out. The play was over. I looked at Marta, at the woman who had once kissed me over a burned pot of coffee and promised me everything. My voice was steady when I said, "Then finish it, but not with me." I gathered my folder, turned off the recorder, and walked out into the cold night air. Behind me, the apartment buzzed with panicked whispers, the sound of a plan collapsing in on itself. The air outside felt like freedom and grief braided together. My breath clouded in front of me as I stood at the curb, folder clutched under my arm like a shield. I half expected someone to chase me, to drag me back into their script, but the door stayed shut. Instead, my phone buzzed. A message from Marta. "Please, just come back in. Let's talk without them." I didn't reply. I couldn't. Every muscle in me screamed to keep walking. I spent that night at Ilya's place. His apartment smelled of instant noodles and engine grease, but it felt more like home than mine did. I laid out the folder on his kitchen table. He read in silence, only pausing to whistle under his breath when Maxim's instructions turned particularly sinister. "You've got enough here to end this whole circus," he said finally. "They wanted to build a story. You've got the real one." The following days were a blur of paperwork. I went to a lawyer, a tired-looking woman with sharp eyes who didn't flinch when I handed her the folder. She skimmed the logs, nodded once, and said, "You're doing the right thing. Step 1 is to detach your finances. Step 2 is documentation. You already did most of it." Her calm steadied me more than coffee ever could. Meanwhile, Marta tried to reach me. Dozens of texts, some frantic, some tender. "It was never about hurting you. They pushed me. I just wanted out without breaking you. Please, can we meet alone?" I stared at the words, wondering which ones were hers and which were planted in her by the mentor who sold freedom like snake oil. I agreed to one meeting. Public, at a cafe, with my aunt quietly watching from a table near the back. Marta looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders curled inward, eyes rimmed red. She clasped her mug like it could anchor her. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she whispered. "Darina and Maxim said it was just strategy, that it would keep things clean. I swear I never wanted you destroyed." I listened. I didn't yell. I didn't even cry. I just asked, "Did you name the group?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "Darina did. I thought it was a joke at first." Her voice cracked. "But then I stayed, and that's on me." It should have broken me, hearing the guilt in her tone, but instead, I felt an odd calm, like the worst storm had already passed and I was standing in the wreckage, counting what was still mine. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a signed agreement dissolving our shared accounts, closing credit lines, untangling every financial knot. My lawyer had drafted it. "This is how it ends," I told her. "No drama, no stories, just paper, just truth." Tears spilled down her cheeks. Real ones this time. She signed. When she looked up, her face was raw. "You were the safest thing I ever had," she said. "And I let them convince me that safety was a cage." I almost reached across the table. Almost. But my aunt's steady gaze from behind her tea reminded me, love isn't proof against betrayal. Promises don't outweigh choices. When it was done, I walked out into the late afternoon light, papers in hand, weight lifting from my chest in uneven bursts. Ilya texted me that night, "How'd it go?" I sent him a photo of the signed agreement and wrote, "The play's over, but the silence after wasn't peace. It was something heavier, like standing in the ruins of a house you built, realizing the walls were hollow all along." I pinned that feeling to the map still hanging in the apartment, the one with Lisbon marked twice. The pins looked like eyes, watching, accusing. I pulled them out and let them fall into the trash. For the first time in months, I slept without counting the fridge cycles. The apartment was too quiet, but the quiet belonged to me. I woke up to light spilling across a space that no longer smelled like her perfume. The silence wasn't sharp anymore. It was wide, stretching, almost kind. I walked into the living room barefoot, saw the map still taped to the wall, ragged edges where pins had been pulled out. For a moment, I considered tearing it down entirely, but instead I left it, blank and stripped, a map without destinations, waiting. In the days that followed, news of Maxim and his little circle drifted back to me in fragments. One of the women who'd sat in my kitchen messaged me an apology, admitting she hadn't known how far the program went. Another hinted that Darina had been pushed out after screenshots leaked to more than just me. As for Maxim, his accounts vanished, replaced by new names. New promises to new people who hadn't learned yet. Predators always find new waters. Marta disappeared from my everyday life, but not completely. One evening, a letter slid under my door. Handwritten, folded into a shaky square. I sat with it for an hour before I opened it. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just need you to know I see it now." I thought I was choosing freedom, but really I was choosing fear. Fear of needing anyone. Fear of being ordinary. "You didn't deserve what I let them plan. You gave me safety and I confused it for chains. I'm sorry not for leaving, but for letting them turn leaving into cruelty. I don't know who I am without all the noise, but I hope you know who you are. Because that's the only thing that saved you." I folded it back up and tucked it into the same notebook where I'd written all my observations, all the evidence. One day I might throw it away. For now, it stays there, a page in a story I survived. I went back to work, back to night shifts and endless calls from drivers lost in storms. Ilya ribbed me one night, said I looked lighter, like I'd finally remembered how to stand on my own. I told him the truth. "It's not that I'm lighter, it's just that I stopped carrying someone else's story on my back." He nodded, and that was enough. At home, I kept rebuilding small things. I cooked for one. I replaced the chipped mug she used with a plain white one that belonged only to me. I set up new bank accounts, clean and untangled. And every morning after a shift, I came home and switched off the lamp in the living room. For months, it had burned all night, unnoticed. Now I noticed. Now I turned it off. One evening, standing in front of the bare map, I pulled the last pins free. The holes in the paper looked like constellations. For the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost a future. I felt like I had space to draw a new one. A map without promises, without scripts. Just me. Quiet, steady, with nothing to prove. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. People can sell you dreams. They can even convince you that you're the villain in their story. But the truth is patient. It doesn't shout. It sits quietly, waiting for the noise to collapse under its own weight. And when it does, you're left with silence. Not the kind that suffocates, the kind that feels like a beginning.